Hi, I'm Cynthia. I'd like to talk about the divine feminine today. Who is she? What is that concept? We're not coming to this idea free and clear of all thoughts and impressions. We have our ideas about what this might mean or what this might represent for us. So who is she? The goddess is an idea or a concept that represents usually the life principle. And that which comes down into form, that which takes form, that which takes a body. In some traditions, the divine feminine is this principle associated with empowerment, or really how vibration becomes life, how vibration represents life, and how form condenses out of the transcendent and takes shape. So in one of the frame stories of the goddess, it is said that she is so in love with her beloved, total transcendence, total stillness, total infinite saturation, that she emerges out of the transcendent in order to give her beloved the only thing that the infinite can't do, and that is to limit or to bind itself, because it's logically impossible for infinity to have form, structure, binding, limitation, or edge. And it's an act of freedom. In fact, her greatest freedom is in that ability to be an edge, to be an individual, to be this dance of shape and form and color and sense, sensory perception. So when we talk about the divine feminine, it's really important to look at the transcendence bias and the patriarchy of spirituality. In these systems, we have so many philosophies, so many religions, so many traditions that really are saying that a spiritual process is only completed when we've moved toward or into total transcendence, toward or into total stillness. And a lot of the practices are designed to do that, to shut the senses down, to draw inward, perhaps to become an ascetic, a monastic, somebody who leaves family, home, city, tradition, and goes off into a different place like a forest or a hermitage or a monastery or etc. And then to do their practice because they're signaling that they're moving toward this transcendence. They're moving toward this commitment to a place of total saturation with what they would consider salvation from form, to discover firsthand the infinite nature of being. And this is a worthy path, but that is not the feminine path. The feminine path is best described as almost the exact opposite, the coming out of the infinite, the coming out of the transcendent, and the condensing into the particular, the taking shape into form. How in the world did we get to a place where we've ignored or diminished the sacred nature of coming into form, of condensing into form? Well, it's taken a lot of years to get us here, thousands, but it's worth looking at, because when our spirituality says that it's only valid to have a spiritual experience when that spiritual experience represents a void, nirvana, grace, salvation, nirodha, samadhi, these terms that are like the immersion into the transcendent, but lacks the language of what happens next, lacks the language of that which recondenses into form, then we start to have trouble. We start to have spiritual crisis. We start to get into, well, I should or I shouldn't. As long as we have a form, as long as we come back from the transcendent, we are creating a tension with that transcendent. Unless, of course, you go into such a dramatic transcendent experience, and this is recorded, that it leads to the cessation of form entirely, to death, or yogic suicide, or whatever these terms are that indicate kind of the completion of releasing form entirely into the transcendent. So I'm not really talking about that form of completion. What I'm talking about is when we have a transcendent experience and then we come back into form, can we reframe the condensation? Can we reframe the journey back into the particular as itself sacred, as itself the divine feminine, as itself the way that this divine feminine principle, the principle of the goddess, the principle of embodiment in form, shines in its most profound freedom. Think about how free, independent, and full that ability to become condensed is. How free and independent and full of power and vibration and pulsation that claiming of the edge the individual has to be. So can we reframe the coming back into form as perhaps not a failure, not a thing to judge, not a thing to say, okay, well, I'm going to start chasing the transcendent experience. I'm going to become a promiscuous mystic. I'm going to go take retreat after retreat after retreat just to get another hit of transcendence. But can we instead start to look at what happens after and find the journey into the particular and into the individual as the radical act of the divine feminine, as the radical act of perhaps even more freedom than the infinite, far more impossible than the infinite, far more instructive, because what happens in the condensation, what happens in the transcendence hangover, what happens when we go from the infinitely large to the very small, the suffering, the pain, the particular, the joys, the hopes, the dreams, the desires, what happens in that process? Is there a potentiality in this process to find our greatest expression of ultimate possibility? And that's the invitation of the divine feminine.